Hello, and thank you for spending some time with us today as we go beyond the lead and discuss best practices to pivot from your traditional lead and funnel management to customer lifestyle marketing, driving persistent business growth and really that long-term value that we're all looking for. I'm Chad Collette. I'm the Director of Marketing here at LedgeView Partners. If you're not familiar with us, LedgeView helps businesses transform their approach to their sales, their marketing, and customer service by aligning these teams to focus on improving their customers' experience through CRM solutions like Microsoft Dynamics 365 and Salesforce, as well as marketing automation platforms like Acton, who I'm happy to have joining us today. Now, before I introduce our main presenter, I have just a few of those standard webinar housekeeping items that I got to cover. First up, and I know it's top of everyone's mind, is today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand. Now, after this webinar is complete, watch out for an email coming from me with a link to view the presentation and also to share with others in or outside your organization. Now, next up, as many people are still working remotely from home, and we know all the sounds and distractions that come with that, we have all attendees on listen-only mode. Now, we don't want to stop any questions, though, so please feel free to enter those in your GoToWebinar control panel, and we're going to reserve some time at the end of the presentation for some questions to field those. Now on to our main topic. You know, historically, prospective buyers had fewer resources to support them throughout the purchasing journey. However, as we move further into the digital age, especially during these times of COVID, over 87% of buyers are starting their product research online. Now, really gone are the days of just attracting and capturing some leads and closing the deal. Companies and marketers need to develop an immersive and holistic lifecycle marketing strategy really to succeed. Now, to share key insights on how to accomplish this key business strategy, I'm excited to welcome David Greenberg from Acton. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Take it away, David.
I will. Thank you. And just to confirm, I want to make sure you can hear me okay?
Yep, looks like we're good to go.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, thanks for having me. You know, I have about a 30 or 40-minute presentation here for the audience, and I think you covered it well, sort of an overview. And there's really three things I wanted to spend some time with the audience here is, one, just do some grounding and level setting around what's the difference between funnel and life cycle marketing. I think especially in marketing, more than any industry, there are plenty of jargons. So I think it's important just to ground and level set on what those are and really what the fundamental differences are. Second thing is just awareness of the market around us and what's changing and why funnel marketing is just not enough these days, and expectations with buyers and expectations of the marketing departments in particular have really changed and will continue to change in the coming years. So once we kind of get through that, I'll talk through some just very common best practices that I see both in the industry and with our client base at Acton. So hopefully the audience can leave with sort of 4 best practices and some things to think about as they begin to consider sort of the next steps into this area. And then at the end, as mentioned, there'll be some time for some Q&A, and feel free to submit those, and happy to answer them here, or if anybody wanted to reach out after, through LinkedIn, I'm happy to connect that way too. So first, I just want to spend a little bit just being clear about what's the difference between funnel marketing and life cycle marketing here. You know, traditionally, funnel marketing is really thought around the concept of customer acquisition, whether it's B2B or B2C. It's this concept of people, they become aware of your brand, and then they start going through consideration. And in a B2B situation, obviously in marketing, there's obviously a handoff to sales, and in B2C, often that sort of has a transaction happens online or in a live situation. But lifecycle marketing really doesn't end with that handoff. Lifecycle marketing is really thinking holistically. Yes, it does still include funnel marketing, but it's more comprehensive. And you're really thinking about what's happening with customer retention, what you're doing to make sure that there's added value along the way. And there's a deep concept of retention and creating interest and ongoing value in the brand out there in the market, which is incredibly important, more so these days, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But this concept of customers being the best marketing is more important these days than ever, and I'll share some ideas why. So conceptually, that's sort of the difference. I'll show you an example of maybe what the modern funnel might look like these days. But also I want to dive a little bit deeper into some of the key areas, at least that we think about and we see a lot is, first, just in funnel marketing, there's this concept of understanding behaviors. And these understanding behaviors are often applied to sort of like in the concept of a lead. And so, the title of this is going beyond the lead. And like, of course, leads and getting new people inquiring about your products and services is hugely important and will always be. But how they get to you is what's really changing. But in lifecycle marketing, marketing is thinking about not just the segmentation for buying behavior, like what digital pages are they visiting on your site or what type of contents are they looking at, but they're also thinking about what happens after that purchase point. And they're thinking about what are customers who are currently using the product, how do we continue to engage with them both at the product level and at the brand level, frankly, because I think the expectations for customers has really changed. And probably more different than anything is this concept of user behavior. Now, there's I saw the attendee list here, there's all kinds of companies who are listening in. And so there's definitely not a one size fit all. So whether you're selling a product, a software, a service, there's this concept of engaging your users, your actual people around your service that is becoming something that marketing is paying more attention to, and is actually one of the most promising times where you can drive heavy value and heavy engagement into the mindset of your customers after acquisition. So that concept between segmentation is very important. Also, like as you can see here, there's this concept of using tech and automation, and clearly, Acton is a marketing automation platform. So we spend a lot of time listening to our customers, partnering with our customers to help develop this. But there has been a big shift around taking these technologies and these automations and using them sort of in the very traditional marketing way, where it's about getting them to the handoff and really start thinking more horizontally. And how do we start understanding and all these great technologies that have happened around funnel marketing in general, but begin applying them over to the full life cycle. So clearly there's this concept of automation. It's more than lead nurturing. There is educational nurturing that needs to take place. There are customer nurturing programs. There are advocacy programs. There are many things that actually make the whole marketing engine work better, that extend far beyond funnel marketing. And like I had mentioned before, that also includes product engagement. So that's teaching them how to use it, the best practices, showing them ways to use it in ways that aren't expected, showing how their peers use it, whatever flavor happens to work for your business. So critically important, major difference. But hopefully everyone here on the call is starting to see the pattern. The other thing that is you absolutely have to call out is sort of the organizational side of all this. Like funnel marketing is like, how does marketing and sales work together, or how does marketing and like website teams work together to drive conversions and drive marketing qualified leads or whatever type of business you're in. But it really fundamentally involves sales and marketing. And I think this is a huge difference as people are starting to evolve into lifecycle marketing. Really, it takes the whole company. It takes your customer service, your professional service, your support teams. It takes all those groups that are touching the customers to think more holistically. So the good news is, at least in the marketing mindset, which I'm definitely talking about here, you already have some experience working with other groups and integrating with sales teams, et cetera. But there suddenly becomes a third sort of post-acquisition group that becomes equally as important at the table and equally important as a design partner. So hopefully that gives some good concept, or at least grounds, like when we're talking about funnel marketing and lifecycle marketing, what some of the main differences are. Obviously, there's a lot more. I had mentioned earlier that I wanted to share what the modern funnel is looking like more and more these days. Everybody has their own flavor of this. There's no doubt about it. I'm a true believer that every business is different, but there are some patterns, and these are some nice generic but I think very logical stages that people that can think through, whether you're B2C or B2B. But I had talked earlier about this conversion point, this purchase, the green layer in the middle. And you can see on B2C, that's sort of like they do the sales transaction. And on B2B, it's like there's sort of like hands over to sales or whatever is happening in your business processes. But sort of the modern marketing funnel is really thinking like, how are we involved in driving the best adoption of the product or service so that they see as much value as quickly as possible and feel like they have a great experience with whatever you're offering quickly. And in most businesses, you're thinking about repeat business or having them sign on for another year or whatever you're doing. And most of the time you're thinking about, I got them using one product. How can I think about the logical part B of that? But all of it, the end of the funnel doesn't end at purchasing here. It ends with advocacy. And this is the concept of getting customers who really love your brand, see value in your brand. And, you know, I think everybody can appreciate there's different types of businesses and a spectrum of this. So you have to think about what applies. But I think everybody would agree that having your brand associated with value or quality, things like that are going to be incredibly important at the end of the day. And the ultimate goal is having your customer base being your advocates out there. That's who your future customers are listening to more and more, and likely who they will listen to almost exclusively in the future. So that's one of the reasons we see this big shift is the power and the voice of what customers can bring out there in the market. So anyway, you know, this thing is out there. There's lots of different flavors of this. Sometimes it's referred to as the bow tie funnel and is horizontal. But we're at Act On, we're a true believer in this. There have been shifts in the market where the power of the customer voice is bigger and bigger, and the power of the brand voice in traditional advertising is less and less. So hence the shift, hence why businesses are focusing on making that transition. So anyway, I teed this up a little bit around just like levels. So around sort of just the fundamental difference between funnel and lifecycle marketing. But I also wanted to make sure that we talk a little bit about why funnel marketing isn't enough. And what the most important difference is that just buyer expectations have changed dramatically in the last 5-10 years. I mean, there's been a digital transformation going on for a long time, but how the expectation of the current buyer, whether you're a B2C consumer or sort of a complex deal, it doesn't really matter. It really has changed. And there's a couple of things that are really important behind this. One of them is buyers are now fundamentally in control of the buying process. They don't have to engage with you. 10 years ago, they would have to engage with sales early to get information and learn about the product and get access to other customers and read reviews. But now there are a myriad of the normal buying behavior as you go out and check it out online beforehand, whether that's anything from like a Google review all the way to like a G2 review sites that are dedicated to this. And so I think that's a really important point is just for a lot of businesses, again, this does not fit every business, but I think the majority will appreciate and understand that the reputation out there matters more and more these days, and the reputation is driven by your customers. And so new buyers, as buyers are coming in, that's where they start. And so when you're getting inquiries, they've already gone 70 yards of the 100 yards, you know, to use an analogy here, in understanding what you have and whether or not they want to even consider you. Whereas in the past, brands had a lot more control of it. So that's a very important point and clearly drives that advocacy funnel we had just talked about. The other one is this expectations that you should know me. And most of us in marketing have for years seen how the power of traditional advertising is decreasing more and more over time. Everything is getting more segmented, even cable television to digital. So the reason they're doing that is because the expectation of the consumer is there, and brands have to meet that expectation. So this whole understanding of like, as I engage with you, you are going to be able to provide me value, and the cost of not providing me value is dramatically higher now than it has ever been, has really changed how brands are marketing these days and where they focus their energy. And where marketing in particular, who's often charged with helping grow the business, is focusing. So that's a very I think very critical. These 2 points, the brand should know me and I'm in control, are very important concepts. I encourage everyone to touch their customers and figure out how they learn about your brands and services. But generally, the trend is going that way. Likewise, I think somewhat trailing behind the consumer behavior is that businesses have a different expectation of marketing now too. Now, this was even outside of sort of what's happening with COVID right now, which I think would add, we can all agree, adds quite a bit more pressure. Is there is this business expectation too. There's this concept of, hey, marketing, I need you to do more with less. And there's this concept of, hey, marketing, you're responsible, you're becoming more and more responsible for growth. So we need your input on where growth should be. And, here at Act On, we talk a lot about growth marketing and those various aspects of that, but this absolutely ties in together with sort of the expectation of leads. Just putting leads in front of a salesperson doesn't often work as much as it clearly as it did 10 years ago. So businesses see that, they feel the impact of that, and thus they're looking for marketing to find other avenues for growth. And so some of these things we'll talk about today hopefully will feed into that. Just to put some data behind all this, and there's often every year something comes out around the top 5 priorities for CMOs, and you'd be remiss to find one that doesn't have customer experience or brand experience in the top 1 or 2 these days. And there's a reason for that. It really ties back to the consumers are in control and their expectations, which we talked about in the prior slide. But I just wanted to share some data. Here's this first one. 4 out of 5, 80% of customers say experience is as important as the brand's offering. So think about that. 4 out of 5 people think the experience is equal or more important than the actual thing you're selling. Like, that's a pretty incredible state. I mean, it speaks to how competitive markets are these days, but it also speaks to what's happening with consumer behavior. Another statistic, 93% of consumers, so this is a very B2C oriented one, but I think it's true of B2B too. Consumers say online reviews impact their purchasing decisions. So think about it. So almost every single customer who purchases looks at a review before they come in. So that matters, and it's an area that marketing, I think, initially thought they didn't have control. But as we start talking about this customer life cycle, you'll see that they do. And then the other thing is around, we had talked about the new modern funnel and customer advocacy. I think marketing very easily can get caught thinking about, what about that one bad review? But I think there's also the half glass full view of this, which is if you can get people talking about it, it can become viral. And I don't mean viral in a crazy social media way, but I'm saying people who love the product and brand will talk about it with their friends. And that is how the new buyers learn. Like, often they'll go to online reviews if they don't have friends. But if they do have friends and like people or business colleagues in their network, you can see how important that is and how much that can help with spreading your word. So that's a very important concept for marketing. And absolutely, we're seeing something happening, a big shift happening in the market. And by the way, I would say this is all deeply accelerated by companies becoming more digital and accelerating digital in this last year. Like, that's been happening anyway, but with COVID, it's become like, you're not going to survive if you're not good at digital. So more and more importance around these areas. So anyway, just some statistics. Everybody can do their own searching. Trust me, there's no shortage of data out there. So with that, Chad, I think we had a poll that we were going to survey the audience and get a feel for them. So maybe you could launch that if you don't mind.
Yep, putting it up right now.
Great, thanks, Chad. Hey, and so we'll leave this up for about 30 seconds or so. And I just, before we dive into these best practices, I always like to get a little bit of a gauge from the audience on sort of where their focus is and where their interest is. And so here you can see, let's just for you guys, if you don't mind filling this out real quickly, just where most of your marketing efforts are focused on. First thing I have is customer acquisition and growing the funnel. I'd be curious around delivering exceptional customer experiences, And then last one, I'm just curious how many are really focused on the more holistic life cycle. So maybe we can keep that up, Chad, for about 10 more seconds here.
Yep, we got about 70% of the vote in so far.
Okay. All right, why don't we share the results with the audience if you don't mind?
All right. Oops. There we go.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so we have about half the audience that's still focused on, customer acquisition and growing the funnel. We've got about a third of the audience who's here delivering kind of most of their focus is around a customer experience, which is really interesting and a growing trend. And we do have 9% focus on holistic customer lifecycle. So that's great information. Let me flip back to the presentation and I'll sort of speak to it at that level. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. That was helpful. So yeah, I want to talk about just 4 best practices. It looked like the majority of the audience was sort of on the early stages of this journey. I think there's with these 4 best practices, I think whether you're advanced or intermediate or beginner, there's a lot of techniques you can take from here. You might just apply them to your business as practically as possible. But I want to talk about digital behaviors first. And the importance of that and what marketing has traditionally done and how you as a business might think and start getting prepared around putting a framework behind understanding not just prospect behavior, but also customer and user behavior. I spent a little bit of time talking about segments, what they look like pre-customer and post-customer, and some ways you can think about that. I want to do a little bit of a deeper dive around engaging around your offering and what that really means. And sometimes there's a little bit of a blurry line between what's marketing and what's just good business, or maybe I should say good communications. And I would agree. So I want to talk about that, but I will say good communications become more important and consistency will become more and more important in these channels. And then last, I want to just leave with some things you could do quickly around an advocacy program. If you're not doing an advocacy program, again, I think for some businesses it might not make sense, but I think most of them it would. I'll share what we do and what we share a lot with our customers, where they have seen some very quick wins and an uptick in their business just by doing a few things. Okay, so first, here I put the modern funnel back up. And for those of you, who are doing customer acquisition and thinking about funnel marketing, you might already be thinking about what channels are working best and, what kind of content do different people look like, or a view of your personas and a mapping of what content should go to them. So there's probably already some work done around tracking those behaviors and which parts of your website get the most traction and how many of those actually show up in your funnel down the road with your sales organization or whatever various situations. So I think that part is that part around digital behaviors is fairly understood, and there are a million great tools out there that do it and can do very specific parts or broader parts. But I think often marketing, it stops there. And in life cycle marketing, you really want to start thinking about these other stages more. And very similar to what you did with the earlier stages, begin mapping what's the communication plan that gets them to the next stage. So, offering engagement, there's this concept of getting them to see value on the product as soon as possible. So that right after purchase, there's a concept of satisfaction that comes in and feeling like they can grow into it. And often I think companies wait and hope that their customer just gets it, figures out how to use it, knows the full power of it. And I think that's an assumption that a lot of companies are questioning. And so we see a lot of businesses now who are really early on pulling marketing in around engagement around the offering early. There's a couple pieces of this that are probably not surprising. One of them is sort of the training aspect of it, which is like how to set it up, how to use it, making sure that they see the full potential. There's also this part of best practices. And again, depending on what type of business you're in, there's different aspects to this clearly, but it's also beginning to have a healthy brand to customer conversation and adding value on top of that. So the experience is great. And that goes back to that data we talked about earlier, where experience reigns over product, and has been shifting that way for the past 5 years at a much more accelerated rate. So very early on, you see marketing more and more being involved into how are we involved with onboarding, how are we involved in a welcome program, how do we help build community out of the gate. And that's just really all about getting them engaged around the product. Because if they don't get that, it's hard to get to the next stages down the funnel. That's why it's built in that linear way. Once you have worked on the mechanics of that, and I would challenge everyone, like you have metrics. There are metrics you can build around each of these to validate who finished it and sort of who's moving forward. But once you start getting into this expansion and advocacy stages, it really becomes around how can marketing work with these customers to help bring enthusiasm out there into the market, right? And clearly when they're in the advocacy stage, that sort of implies that they're willing to talk about it. Some people are willing to talk about it privately in a room with their family. Some people are willing to go out and write reviews. Some people are willing to do video testimonials. There's a lot of things you can do around this. But understanding who is that advocate and begin tracking those digital behaviors so that somebody who has been a power user, I'm making this up here, power user for the last year, is active on your community, consistently attends your best practice sessions, starts fitting into somebody who's an advocate and really liking what they're seeing with what you're doing and your brand. And so so my sort of advice on all of this would be like, start thinking about digital behaviors beyond just the lead. Begin thinking about, how do I start tracking digital behaviors, or where should I be tracking digital behaviors, if able, post-purchase? Where are the sites that they go in? What content are they looking on? How can I figure out what my customers are interested in so I can have strong customer programs? And clearly we're in an automated fashion, ideally, because I think that's the future, and in the way you can scale. So hopefully that gives you some ideas around tracking digital behaviors, and hopefully you're thinking about, hey, in my business, what are the digital properties I have, and how can I start tracking what customers are doing that and getting it into my marketing system or CRM or whatever you happen to use. So that's one thing. The other one I want to talk a little bit is just defining segments. I think in marketing, the discipline of defining personas and digital segments, pre-purchase is fairly well known and understood, and there's a lot of tools out there to do it. It's one of the big promises of a marketing automation platform, frankly, is having all behavior tracked in one place so that you can build smart programs and do better marketing with it. But what you think about pre-purchase is very different than what you think about post-purchase. So in pre-purchase, like we talked about earlier, talking about who's my active segment, who are visiting my website more than 3 times a week and has visited the pricing page once. I'm making that up. That's a good example of an active segment. But post-customer, it's different. So you have to start thinking about, how am I creating segments around purchasing history, especially in B2C businesses where you might have a myriad of purchases, and the combination of purchases might bring insights into things they would find value down the road. You have to begin finding segments about with what you're offering. Like, I'll give you an example in our business. We have several insurance clients. Some of our more advanced insurance clients have their plan online, and subscribers can go and look at their plan online. And as you know, there's all different shapes of insurance plans, but often they come with perks, side perks, benefits, etc. So they have a whole program set up. This is a really great example, actually, around engaging around the offering. You have someone who's going in and looking at the plan. You show that they're actively interested in trying to figure out what value they're getting, and they can identify which perks that they're looking at. And they have automated programs that begin to communicate very openly and transparently that's just state, hey, we saw that you were checking out the plan and look to be interested in this part of your plan. Here's the 3 things you can do to really take advantage of this. Call me if interested. And the results have just been amazing because it's very relative to what they're interested in. And the brand experience of the brand is they're going above and beyond and setting up and thinking about what the consumers really want. So anyway, I always love that example because it's a very easy place where you think marketing doesn't have a place, but it really does. And that's marketing with a lowercase m. So anyway, just start thinking about your different segments that happen for your customer base beyond just demographics. Very behavioral. What are they purchasing? Where do they engage around your product? How responsive are they to your communications? Like, are they engaged? Are they not? Do they log in? Do they not? Things like that. And then also making sure that you can track sort of the loyalty side of it. In sort of more advanced situations, you're looking at 3 or 4 digital properties and you're centralizing that into a platform, and then you can have a full understanding. But there's lots of different ways to do that. I put an example here too, by the way, of one of our clients. I thought this is another great example. I think most of us are familiar with hotels, or at least used to be, and how loyalty programs work. And but there's actually like a science behind it, and all of these steps are measured. And so I just wanted to provide an example of one of the hotel chains that we work with, and how they have sort of organized their segments just around their loyalty program. Like, again, why do they do this? Clearly, it's all driven to drive more sales and more revenue down the road and having repeat customers. But let me tell you, in the hospitality industry, you're thinking about experience all the time. So they want their members to take advantage of this loyalty program because they feel like they get extra value and extra perks. And so they have set up this very detailed and scalable program around trying to drive more usage out of their loyalty program, right? So there's this concept of there's people who actually are using it and there's people who aren't, and they have a communication path for each one of those. And then they have obviously key triggers that drive the communication. So the experience reigns supreme. Behind the scenes, all of this sort of logic and this workflow drives when the minute somebody registers and they're walking to the elevator, they get their free drink, or I think it actually was one of the things they did was a free drink, right there on the spot that they can take advantage of with the name of the person working there. So really impressive, really thoughtful in terms of how you have create a memorable experience and really make the brand shine. And those people are going to tell their coworkers, tell the person that they're meeting with tomorrow, and that's the most like effective marketing, and certainly where, like in my opinion at least, where a lot of the shift is happening. So that's another example. I've been talking about engaging around your offering. I wanted to just share a couple examples of areas you can start focusing in on. We talked a little bit about onboarding and training, whether you're selling a widget or you have a complex software product. Usually there is this concept of, here's the best way to use it. Here's how to take care of it. Here are the 3 things you need to do to set it up properly, whatever it happens to be. But this whole concept of being engaged in the onboarding and early experience of your product or your offering with the customer, and having marketing play a role and partner with the implementation team or sales team or whoever it happens to be in this case, I think is a very critical place to start. Most companies have some form of this, some form of welcome to the brand, welcome to the company. So I think there's a lot for companies to build off of there. Depending on what kind of product you have or what you're selling, I think when things are digital, obviously you can take advantage of a lot more here. But if you're everything from selling services or selling a product, this whole concept of when I know my customers are starting to use it, how do I have a sort of an ongoing educational program with them that they can opt in or out of at any time? I think you have to design it that way in today's day and age. It's super important. And, wherever you can find digital hooks to drive those communications will be very important. And then there's the more well-known, like, hey, when you have new products or services coming out, how do you communicate to that whole base and say it in a way that makes it look like it's connected to what they bought before, if possible, right? So that they're seeing extra value on it. And it's not just a generic sales email, which I think is about the worst thing you can do these days. So I want to give you that example. And then last thing I wanted to talk about was just around developing advocacy programs. I think a lot of companies, and you can see even in our own, in the attendees here today, about half of them were already doing some of this. I think this is a really great place to start. If you haven't done any sort of life cycle nurturing, and you're wondering about where's the place I can drive the most growth for the business, often it starts with, how do I begin to utilize my customers who are enthusiastic about the product? And again, there's a wide range of things you can do. I'll give you sort of a middle of the road example here. And something we talk about is, one thing we do, and when we see a lot of clients do, is they have usually sort of a satisfaction survey that goes out. How are we doing? What can we do better? Most companies want to learn. And there's a lot of ways that this can come in. And usually that can start to be a great way for you to figure out who's really enthusiastic and who we need to spend more time on. By the way, we're not talking about those in this presentation, but maybe a future topic. But there are ways you can start to identify who are your most enthusiastic customers and start putting them into that segment I was talking about earlier. Then you can start your workflows behind them. You can get them to do simple things like, we'd love you to give us a quote, all the way to, we'd love you to write a review on the site and we'll give you an incentive to do it. So there's this whole concept of, like, they're out there talking about it. You have this set of customers who are loving what you're doing, love the product they bought, love the service they're getting. But I think it's marketing's job to give them the megaphone or lead them down the megaphone. And, so we talk here about elevating their voice, and, I think you have to figure out what works and not ask too much of customers as well. There has to be incentives behind this. But that's critically important, because if you think about that new modern funnel, what really is starting to attract new customers more and more, and where they look to, is what are other customers saying. So that flywheel is incredibly important. That's what we're trying to represent on this slide. Like I said, it begins with figuring out and identifying in a programmatic way how you build a segment of, here are our advocates. There's a business criteria that has been met, and they sit in this segment, and it is an asset that marketing can respectfully use. Then you have to think about how you create programs to get their voices out, whether it's review sites. Will you please write a Google review after purchase? If they're a repeat customer, I'm going to assume you're happy with the first purchase and ask you to do it at that moment. And then understanding how those are attracting new customers and which ones come in, and that'll help, sort of finesse the whole thing. So I think that's a really important, place to start. And usually there's a lot of material to work with, to be frank, in this area in businesses we see. So with that, thank you very much. That sort of concludes the presentation. I am not sure, Chad, I'll hand it back over to you, and you can let me know. I'm not sure if we've got any questions. I'm happy to answer anything here, or everybody can hit me up after the fact.
Yeah, thanks a lot, David. I really appreciate it. So for anybody that does have any questions, this is a good time to kind of get those submitted, and we can hit those live before we let David go today. I do have a couple in here, though, David, if you wouldn't mind. And
sure.
I know a lot of us kind of experience this too, but what if we don't have a dedicated customer marketing team member, and kind of most of us are focused on just that on-demand lead gen?
Yeah, no, I mean, this is prior. Sorry, I'll say that one more time. Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think I run across lots of folks who don't have a dedicated customer marketing. I don't think you have to have a dedicated person to do it. I just think it's a new way of thinking about demand. And this really is all about demand creations. Now, I'm not saying that you should shift all the resources. You've got to place your bets and figure out how you're going to expand and drive growth. But I think, you know, in the situation where I clearly relate to and understand this, we have limited resources. It's about figuring out what percentage you think will support your hypothesis. I think the reality is that consumer behavior, I'm not saying every business is consumer. So everybody on the phone probably is the expert in their own industry and their own business, but consumers in general, that is where they are beginning to learn, or not beginning to learn, beginning to rely on learning. So I don't think it's a place marketing can ignore. I think it's a fair question on how much resource. Clearly, if you have something that is working, taking your foot off the gas in that area and just completely shifting doesn't always make sense. But I think if you can find, how do I dedicate 10% of my time to start on this and see and experiment so I can see what returns I get and what works. Clearly, you know, in our world, we're a marketing automation platform. So we always guide to create the right flow, and then it scales automatically. Like that's, I think, the whole point behind that. I wouldn't want it to be a manual thing. But in some businesses, that actually does make sense. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to just kind of expand on that, you know, based on some of those smaller companies too, from a life cycle marketing perspective. Is there a way to kind of involve the entire company?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, I think the real easy win that often comes up is working with whoever is responsible post purchase. I think it's very hard to do life. I think it's one of the big changes is it's not just a sales and marketing conversation anymore. It's the other groups and the other stakeholders who are involved in it. And sometimes that might feel like it's boiling the ocean and really hard to find a place to start. So the thing I would always say is, you know, I think marketing autonomously can start on identifying the advocates, right? Identifying who are the people and where do we create and put the names of all the people who we know are a bench of advocates for us. That's one area. The other area that I think is great to start and super important is making sure customers are communicated with well and see satisfaction post-purchase very early. So often that involves like, you know, an implementation or a professional service team or sort of the online e-commerce, if you're like an e-commerce review, but that's sort of my recommendation there.
All right, thank you. That kind of seems to wrap up a lot of the questions. So again, if anybody has any other questions based on this, please feel free to contact David, contact myself. After this, you know, look for an email coming from myself that's going to have access to this on demand. I also really want to encourage you to go out to legacypartners.com, go to acton.com, and there is really just a whole slew of resources out there that would be beneficial, not only from a life cycle customer marketing, but also from the lead gen side, connecting with your CRM, and really a whole lot more. It's just amazing, from demos to ebooks, infographics, blogs, kind of you name it. There is educational resources out there. Any other kind of closing thoughts, David, before I close it out here?
No, I think that's a great point. We clearly spend a lot of time thinking about it and trying to share our insights with the industry. So yeah, I encourage people to look resources across both our sites. That's a great call out.
Okay. And anybody looking to, you know, kind of get more from marketing automation, kind of take that next level up. Obviously there's demos out there, but really the best way to get a good look at it is a personal demonstration. And we are happy to provide that at any time. So thank you very much, David, for joining us. And I want to thank everybody else for taking time out of your very busy schedules to join us today. I want to wish you good health. Stay safe out there, stay well, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.